Do you know who Louise Joy Brown is?
Of course. The first test tube baby.
Exactly. And today we're talking about the woman behind that miracle. The mother of IVF, basically. A woman whose dedication helped solve infertility for millions of people around the world. Her name is Jean Purdy, and even though history tried to tuck her behind the men she worked with, her fingerprints are on every modern fertility clinic that exists today.
Intro. Jean Marianne Purdy was born on April 25th, 1945 in Cambridge, England, to George Robert Purdy and Gladys May Southgate. Her dad was a technician at the Cavendish Laboratory, and her mom was a homemaker. She had one older brother named John. Not a whole ton is known about her early life, but we know that she attended Cambridgeshire High for girls between 1956 and 1963. She became a prefect, like Harry Potter prefect, aka she was like really smart and like top of her class, joined a sports team and played violin in the orchestra. Then she trained to be a nurse at Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge.
So after she became an official nurse, Jean moved to Southampton General Hospital. It seemed that she was maybe homesick and missing home a little bit as she applied for a research post locally to work on tissue rejection. She later transferred to Papworth Hospital in Cambridgeshire, where the first open heart surgeries and later heart transplants happened in Britain. In 1968, she took a position of research assistant to the physiologist Robert Edwards at the Physiological Laboratory in Cambridge. So she was like what we are right now.
Oh, stop trying to eat me! Oh my god. Yes, she was like us. She was in research and she was super cool. So, in 1968, Robert Edward began to collaborate with obstetrician and gynecologist Patrick Steptoe. What an interesting name. Who introduced the idea of laparoscopy for gynecology in the United Kingdom. Laparoscopic surgeries are minimally invasive surgical procedures that are performed in the abdomen and are very common today. They use this technique to harvest oocytes without need for major surgery. If you live under a rock, an oocyte is like a female egg or like a sex cell. So, yeah. But laparoscopy, if you didn't know, is not the only way that is used to harvest female egg cells.
So, for a laparoscopic surgery, they kind of make a small cut and insert like a tube-like instrument with a camera, and then the camera is actually the part that's called the laparoscope. This is like irrelevant, but I thought it was interesting because I think prior I didn't really fully like grasp the idea of what the heck is laparoscope. Anyway, so there's like a little scissor or like grasper at the end of like the long tube thing, and this way the surgeon can kind of like perform the surgery and with the camera see what's going on inside the body without like causing a whole lot of damage. They'll just like look at a little camera screen or TV on the side while they just like little laser gun pretty much for the laser. Anyway.
Yeah, it has to have like a ton of like really good like hand-eye coordination, and honestly there's been a couple of studies where it's like people who play video games are like better at it because like they're better with their hands.
And so like even a step above that, the like Da Vinci things that are coming out, the robots.
Yeah, the little like things where it's like you have three things and you just move it like that.
I remember when they first did, okay, this is silly, but surgery on a grape. Mm-hmm. And like years ago, and it was like kind of a meme, but like not really a meme.
Yeah.
And that was like the first time like the Da Vinci robots were like kind of like in use for like public and in practice. And now we have hundreds of like half the surgeries at MUSC are low-key just robots.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Anyway, super cool the way that technology keeps going on and on. But basically, so the benefits both of laparoscopy and these like other things like Da Vinci surgeries, the benefits are less pain, smaller scars, shorter hospital stays, and faster recovery compared to like traditional open surgery. Like you can literally get your gallbladder removed and be back at work the next day if you really wanted to. I think the next day is like a little soon, but like people do it all the time.
Right. So Jean started working with Robert Edwards and Patrick Steptoe as a lab tech at first, but her goal was to work on in vitro fertilization, aka IVF. So IVF is where an egg is combined with a sperm outside of a living organism to make an embryo. Then that embryo is transferred into a uterus. It's a form of assisted reproductive technology that's used for infertility. And today, almost everyone knows at least someone who's gone through IVF, but at the time, it was radical and almost an unthinkable idea. It required precise timing, environmental controls, and intense understanding of human embryology, and that didn't even really exist at the time. So it wasn't a simple or quick process, and they were literally learning everything from ground up.
So the team began to work on IVF. At the time, though, very little was known about human embryology or how to maintain the embryos, and the research in general provoked severe moral outrage, so funding was little to none. Because of this, both Robert and Patrick had full-time day jobs. Robert worked as an academic at the University of Cambridge, and Patrick worked as an NHS consultant in Oldham. The team was given a small lab space at Kershaw's Cottage Hospital and permission to do their research in their spare time. They did have to finance the equipment completely by themselves, and I believe that both Robert and I think Jean had to drive pretty far to actually get to the lab.
Yeah, that's crazy. And so Jean managed that lab pretty much alone. As Eva said, this is very underfunded, completely everything they're doing on their own.
She was the only one who wasn't working a day job.
Right. And so she spent more time in the lab than Robert did. She prepared culture media, recorded data on endocrine monitoring, supported the patients, and ran so many different tests. And over 10 years, hundreds of women volunteered their eggs, initially for research and then later because they hoped for infertility treatment. Jean was the only person allowed in the lab except for an American scientist named Joseph Schultzman.
Yeah, I could not find any other data on him.
Interesting.
So it's okay, it's not his story.
Exactly.
So she even traveled with Robert in 1969 to California to do some research. She played a very significant and increasingly important role. When she took some time off to care for her sick mother, they literally had to pause their research, completely stop the research when she was gone. So I feel like this literally puts her on equal playing field if they depended on her approach to research in order to successfully study IVF. They would not be able to do anything without her, even though she was only holding the title of research assistant, so to speak.
Yeah. So during this time, the team endured a ton of criticism and hostility from the National Funding Agency Medical Research Council, aka the MRC, because that is a mouthful. But they thought that Cambridge's institutions and clinical facilities were just problematic. And so the MRC thought that IVF was way too experimental, and it sparked complete moral outrage.
So some people believe that this type of work, aka IVF, was completely unnatural or unsafe. Some newspapers even compared their experiments to Frankenstein science, which obviously did not help them win public support or any sort of funding. So funding was extremely limited. Equipment had to be purchased out of pocket, and people were watching them with suspicion rather than encouragement.
In February 1971, they tried to get funding from the MRC, but it was denied. In mid-1974, Robert Edwards became upset from the lack of progress and the lack of funding, which, I understand. He's put time and effort, and you know who else has put time and effort? Freaking... Oh my god, what's her name?
Jean?
Jean! Yes, I don't know why I just, blanked on her name. Jean! Jean put time and effort in, too. So, obviously, both of them, they're all frustrated. And like Eva mentioned, they also had to, do insane commuting. And Robert was straight up to Jean, yo, you want to give up? I don't see this going anywhere. And he was just maybe we should explore other prospects, explore other people.
And so according to Jean's childhood friend, Rosemary Carter, Jean kept her ground and put all her support behind the continuation of IVF project. She pretty much said, no, this is our project, we're going to stick with it. We've put so much time and effort and our own money, we need to finish it and see it through. She really believed in this project, and because of that, she was able to convince Robert to continue the IVF research. It was Jean that saw the first ever fertilized egg that was dividing to make new cells. According to Jean's obituary in the Times, Jean was the first person to identify and describe the formation of human blastocytes.
Anywho, so Louise Joy Brown was the first human born following contraception by IVF. and they were born on July 25th, 1978. The first IVF baby boy, Alistair MacDonald, was born in January 1979. Louise's birth put pressure on MRC to quickly become a significant backer of the team's research. Despite their success, the NHS refused to support the service, and the team made urgent attempts to fund a private clinic close to Cambridge where they could work together. Jean eventually found a Jacobean manor?
I was thinking Jacobean, but I don't know.
Jacobean. She found a house for sale. And this became the world's very first IVF clinic, Bourne Hall. In 1980, she helped launch fertility services there. Wow, I really can't speak today. Good gracious.
It's something about like being in front of the camera. So Jean unfortunately passed away from malignant melanoma on March 16th, 1985, at the quite young age of 39. She was a very private person. She didn't tell a single person for over 18 months about her condition because she didn't want anyone to take pity on her. During her illness, Robert arranged a room for her in Burn Hall so that she could still be a part of the team and receive guests up until the very end.
Jean was buried beside her mother and grandmother in Grantchester Churchyard, just outside Cambridge. On July 20th, 2018, Louise Brown, the world's first test tube baby, honored Jean by laying flowers on her new memorial and headstone following a church service that was attended by Jean's colleagues, friends, and relatives.
So there's actually a movie called Joy that came out at the end of last year. It's based on Jean Purdy and her contributions that helped make IVF treatment possible. I watched the trailer for it as I was like researching her. I found it, and it actually seems like a pretty good movie. It seems to like follow her story instead of like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Like it seems like they did a good job, basically.
I see.
So the movie apparently does depict Jean as suffering from a severe case of endometriosis that prevents her from being pregnant. This pushes her character in the movie to devote her life to helping other women get pregnant. But there's not a whole bunch of evidence towards if the real Jean decided to pursue IVF research because of her own health. Her close friends later stated to like a couple of people who were interested in her life that they really do believe that she did have endometriosis, but she was a very private person.
Yeah, it seems like it.
So we don't really know. There's just speculations.
Regardless of her choice to pursue IVF research, just as Robert and Patrick are known as the fathers of IVF, Jean was the mother of IVF. She was a deeply religious Christian, and yet fought deeply against religious criticisms of IVF. The Catholic Church particularly raised many objections to her work in her lifetime. She spent her life focused on her job rather than her own relationships.
Her contribution to science is recorded through her papers. Jean was a co-author on 26 papers with Patrick and Robert, and 370 IVF children were conceived during her career. But Jean's living legacy is that through her dedication to IVF treatment, over 300,000 IVF children have been born in the UK since the birth of Louise, with over 20,000 conceived at Burn Hall, which I'm not sure if we mentioned, but she was like the lead director there. And now over 12 million babies have been conceived by IVF worldwide. So
Yippee!
That's the story of Jean.
Jean!